There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third session of Next Economy North Bay's Action Climate Change Guest Speaker Series for 2022. My name is Alex Miller, and I will be your moderator this evening. In my day job, I work with Simon, who you'll hear from in a little bit, as a sustainability officer at Reefing Green. On the call tonight, we have our local and familiar faces, including other speakers, and plus the co-organizers and sponsors for this event. We're delighted to have you join us this evening and hope that you'll be able to attend our other presenters' talks over the next few weeks, which you can see on the screen here. Next week, we'll be hearing from Dave Smits, partner at InduSpec, who will be giving his presentation on sustainable buildings design. If you're interested in attending, be sure to register on Eventbrite and join us again on Zoom. I'll be posting that link in the chat also momentarily in case you lost it somewhere along the way. Just some housekeeping matters before we get going. I'd like to remind everyone to remain muted throughout today's presentation, though you can feel free to leave your cameras on. If you have any questions, please make a note as we go along, and we'll allow for a Q&A session at the end of each presentation to encourage participation. You can either raise the hand signal if you'd like to ask a question in person, or you can always just place it in the chat. Our speakers will be also putting together some resources which we can circulate, like the slides, and we'll send that all along with contact information in the coming days following the presentation. Before we dive in, I'd like to acknowledge the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the land on which we are gathering today, commonly known as North Bay, is situated in traditional Anishinaabe territory on the lands occupied by the peoples of Nipissing and Duckies First Nation. I'd like to acknowledge how grateful we are for the opportunity to gather, and I thank all the generations of people who have been stewards of these lands. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions which Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, our province, and the country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must be clearly connected to our collective commitment to deliver on the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation in our communities. Gathering remotely via Zoom also means that we get to connect with people from across Turtle Island, which means our land acknowledgements often have to go beyond, North Bay. So please, if you're joining us from afar and if you feel comfortable, I encourage you to also share in the chat where you are joining us from today. So anyone new to the call, if you haven't caught any of our previous sessions, which if you're wondering, they're on YouTube, which you can just search up Next Economy North Bay. But if you're new, you might not know this. So what is Next Economy North Bay? Founded in early 2019, Next Economy North Bay comprises of a grassroots collective of local business and community leaders who are seeking to build capacity so the city of North Bay and surrounding communities may become leaders in the modern low carbon economy. It aims to provide a local, reputable, and publicly accessible body of knowledge and information, which acknowledges the existence of climate change at the same time as showcasing some of the many ways communities, businesses, and households can transition to a cleaner, greener, and more equitable economy. To date, the group has organized many public-facing events, including North Bay's first Sustainability Expo in 2019, which included a full day of programming, including 5 guest speakers, a good investing workshop, 30 sustainability-oriented vendors, and over 200 guests. It was a big event. And after that, we had the North Bay Commuter Challenge, which coincided with Canadian Environment Week in June 2021. And now here we are, our first guest speaker series with 5 guest speakers sharing their knowledge and expertise over the course of 5 weeks, up until February 17th, every Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Be here or be square. For further information and to show your support, check out our past activities on Next Economy North Bay's social media pages. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So I'm just going to cover a bit of an overview of what we're going to do today. First, we'll have Simon provide some more information regarding the work that he and Reefing Green have been doing to support the development of more sustainable communities in Northern Ontario. Then I'll introduce Brennain Lloyd, who is the project coordinator at Northwatch, and will be delivering a presentation called Transportation Options, Sustainability and Social Connections. Following that, we'll open the floor for Q&A, at which time you can ask Brennain any questions arising from the session. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Simon. Take it away.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Alex, and hello, everybody. Good evening. In line with Brennain's topic today, I figured I'd take a few minutes just to briefly highlight a couple of sustainability and social connection-led projects that Reefing Green has undertaken in the recent years. In 2019, the organisation was awarded funding by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, and the Independent Electricity Systems Operator to produce 2 regional energy and emissions plans, or REAPs, as they became known. So these covered 25 municipalities, townships, and First Nation communities on Manitoulin Island and the North Shore of Lake Huron. So you might be asking, what is a REAP? Well, you could say it's a way of quantifying our greenhouse gas emissions, taking into account a wide range of emission sources and scopes, and determining this as a carbon dioxide equivalent measurement. This is in accordance with established frameworks. So it all sounds a bit complex, right? But for those of you perhaps a bit more pressed for time, I'll summarize in the context of the REAPs that we produced a methodology, and this involved compiling data sets from a different range of energy emission sources. And the information was shared to us by municipal partners, such as for energy intensive uses like arenas and offices. We also obtained some provincial data such as for annual average vehicle traffic counts along the provincial highways, and some federal statistics and standards such as those contained within the 2016 population census. So we compiled all this data and entered it into a series of algebraic equations. And this helped us to understand the total baseline emissions for each of these communities. The next step in the project was to enter this data into some climate modeling software. This allowed us to predict what we can expect to see here in Northern Ontario in future years. And that would be should we continue with a business as usual approach. I'll be delving a bit further into the REAPs and their findings during my own presentation on 17th February. So I won't spoil anything else here, but what I would like to emphasize, and similar to Kylie and Rod's presentations over the last 2 weeks, just how essential it is to engage different stakeholders at all different stages of a project. So then we feel equipped to not only understand the science, but to feel like they have a positive role to play in the process as we set about reimagining how our northern communities can mitigate and adapt to climate change. And we can also address a myriad of other issues as we go about this, from energy poverty to social inclusion, from housing affordability to acting on climate change itself. Anyone interested in reviewing the REAPs and the accompanying reports and consultations can do so via our Smart Green Communities page at www.reefinggreen.ca. Second project I'd like to highlight, and perhaps a bit more appropriate for this audience, is my work in the fall, winter of 2020, where I worked as part of a local group, grassroots consortium, to prepare an entry to the Sudbury 2050 International Urban Design Ideas Competition. This was an international urban design ideas competition held by the McEwen School of Architecture at Laurentian University in partnership with the City of Greater Sudbury. So on my part, I collaborated with individuals from, as a staff member and student from the McEwen School itself, local Indigenous leaders who guided the integration of the Anishinaabe language and cultures and values of the Atikameksheng people, a community arts organization, the Junction Creek Stewardship Committee, the Coalition for a Livable Sudbury, Science North, and some local academics. And our submission was informed by a community-wide consultation, which had over 1,000 responses. It was entitled Mash KKK, A Story of Healing pour Nue pour la Terre, which translates in English as to make medicine for us and for the earth. So the live final was moderated by Steve Pakin of TVO Television, And I believe Alex can now play a short extract from the video that we played at that event.
Buried below the downtown of Sudbury flow two ancient waterways, Junction Creek and Nolan Creek, beginning with the source in Swakamuck, where the rivers, roads merge, is water. Nibih, bih, water is the source of Bamadswin, life. Mishkikike, making medicine. Water is medicine, and having access to it is healing. Odenung, at the heart of community. Sudbury's downtown is Ode, the heart, where Shkode, the fire burns with our shared history, and Bindigek welcomes all to come in. Bindigek is so much more. It is about reciprocity, mutual benefit, sharing, healing.
What is the downtown and community we want to live in? Answers from over 1,000 community members created the seed vision and 5 themes for this project. From this starting point, our diverse local team, rooted in the community, grew the guiding vision. The design team developed the final imagery and design details with feedback from the team and community. This design plants the seed for an inclusive and community-based plan for the urban core. Ongoing community engagement is integral to our vision of downtown. Community engagement is not only about shaping the vision, but an essential part of everyday life in a thriving downtown.
Sudbury is decolonised. Sudbury is located within Atikameksheng Anishinaabe territory. The Atikameksheng people will lead the changes needed to support healing of ourselves and the earth. Sudbury is part of a healthy ecosystem and watershed. Low-impact development, including green infrastructure, will support enhanced biodiversity and improved water quality, connecting people with nature. Sudbury is net zero and climate energy ready. Sustainable buildings, public transit and active transportation, waste management, recycling and renewable energy systems will enable the downtown to function as a waste-free circular economy. Sudbury is caring, safe, friendly and caring for all. Downtown is revitalised but not gentrified, with affordable housing, sustainable food and accessible washrooms. Sudbury is vibrant, inclusive and inspiring sport, recreation, entertainment and public art, which reflects the unique history, communities and diverse stories of this territory.
Rewilding rail yards. By removing all downtown train traffic, the 500-acre rail yards are allowed to rewild and heal naturally. This allows for the reconnection of surrounding neighborhoods to the downtown core. As the land heals, some affordable and sustainable housing can be integrated into this new green space.
On complete streets that support walking, cycling, public transit, and an electric vehicle car share, a 2.3-kilometer free public electric bus loop is established. These green streets feature permeable road brickwork and treed central meridians. All new housing and key services are located along this mobility corridor.
Behold the Junction. The new 20,000 square foot Sudbury Art Gallery is a national cultural destination.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we paused it there because we just wanted to take it to the point where they speak about transportation. But anyone who wants the video, I believe Alex can put that link in the chat, or I can in a bit. But if you want to see the rest of it, it was a really exciting project, and I really hope that we could do something like that in North Bay one day. So let's see. So just continuing briefly. So, well, I'm pleased to report anyway, in terms of this, that we did come second out of 100 teams who entered from 28 countries across the world. And we received an honorary mention for the collaborative way in which we went about the project. So the project really proved to me that locally developed solutions really can have an impact, can resonate with local people, and that we do have the answers. And with that, I'll hand it back to Alex, who will introduce Brennain, our speaker of today.
All right, thanks, Simon. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Brennain Lloyd. Brennain is a public interest researcher, writer, and community animator working in the areas of environment, energy, and natural resource management. She's been involved in many successful campaigns and information sharing activities regarding environmental initiatives over the years, though her primary affiliation has been with Northwatch, a regional coalition in northeastern Ontario. In her media quote, Brennain said, "How we get from point A to point B is easy for some and a challenge for others. Moving to transportation options that increase social connection and decrease our carbon footprint is a key part of transitioning to a more sustainable society." And I'm super keen to hear more on this, and we're delighted to have you join us, Brennain. The floor is all yours. You should be able to share your screen, and I'll put myself on mute.
Great, thank you, Alex. I'll just get this set up to go. My toolbar always disappears over the very place I need to click to turn the slideshow on. And my system is very slow because my laptop is overly full. But here we go. You're all sharing the slowness of my system. So thank you very much, Alex, and thanks for that introduction as well, Simon. I'm very happy to be here speaking with you all this evening. And I will say that this is the first time I've done this presentation. So I was telling Alex and Simon before we opened the session that I'm going to ask Simon to give me a 20-minute time tap, because I believe that I'll be done in 20 minutes. So if I'm not, he should tell me. So thanks again. It's my pleasure to talk about this project. This is a very modest project that Northwatch is undertaking. But it's one that we're really excited about. It's one that's been in the works for a while. We had originally envisioned it to be very community-based, live and in person, doing community roundtables and farmers markets and so on. And just as we were about to launch, COVID launched. So we suspended the project, then we're going to relaunch, and COVID reasserted itself, so we suspended again. And now we've accepted that we're going virtual, which is not the way we wanted to do it, but it is the way we're going to do it. And it, we're now very eager to get to those conversations and happy to have this conversation as a preamble to those community sessions that we're about to launch. So the project is around transportation options and looking at transportation options for residents in Northern Ontario, where we face particular challenges, both within our communities, getting around within our communities and between our communities. So the goal of the project really is to explore with project participants, what are their transportation needs, what are their challenges, and share some experience and some thinking that's been done around how we might meet some of those needs and resolve some of those challenges. So with our diminishing population, it's unlikely that the small and medium-sized communities in Northeastern Ontario are going to establish a municipally supported transit system in the sort of the traditional way that we think of it, the kind of transit system that we have, for example, here in North Bay or in Sudbury, Timmins, Temiskaming Shores, the larger centers. And even if we, even if the smaller communities did, there's many people live outside of organized municipalities in very small communities. But there are some really good examples of alternative transportation options that we think will work in Northern Ontario. And it's those kinds of options that we want to be exploring and sharing and having conversations with about through this project. So the context for the project is Northeastern Ontario. We're really looking mostly at experience in Northeastern Ontario. And we expect that our findings from this project will be transferable across the region, but our delivery focus is Nipissing and Temiskaming districts. And we're looking for a mix of small, a medium, and a couple of relatively large communities, North Bay and Temiskaming Shores. within that, even that smaller geographic area of Nipissing and Temiskaming districts, many residents live in smaller communities. They travel to larger, medium and larger sized communities for many of the services. And for many communities, both in Nipissing and Temiskaming district and throughout the region, many communities are in the interior, what we call the interior. So we have this circle of 11 and 17 goes around northeastern Ontario, and there are limited transportation options, particularly between communities in that loop, but there are far fewer in what we call the interior communities. And as we all know, and I think lament, rail service was discontinued a number of years ago, which did not improve the situation. Although we have seen, and I'm very pleased that we've seen some real improvements and expansion of bus services provided by Ontario Northland Transportation Commission over the last few years. So our transportation system both shrank with the loss of rail and expanded with the expansion of Ontario Northland's bus services. We also have some rail services. The VIA system from Sudbury to White River and from Sudbury to Western Canada. In Nipissing-Temiskaming district, our only rail service is in Cochrane, north of the district, in Cochrane, going from Cochrane to Moosonee. So we are still quite limited, even though with the very welcome expansion of the Ontario Northland bus system. And I will say on a personal note, it is a improved service. We lost Greyhound services a few years ago, and the Ontario Northland expansion has more than compensated for the loss of that Greyhound service. But still we find overall deficiencies throughout the region. So the project is motivated, it's twofold. It's a climate motivation that through the use of personal vehicles, extensive use of personal vehicles, that reliance on the private car, we increase congestion, we impact air quality locally, and we increase our carbon footprint. But there's also a personal connection that is lost when we don't have transportation options available. And those are social connections, ability for people to just connect with community, with family, with services, with sports, with recreation. And that breaking that social isolation is a very important part of making sustainable and viable transportation options available. So the project has 5 phases, and we have lingered a long time in phase 1, which is researching and sort of pulling our information base together. And we're only now moving into phase 2, where we start doing community roundtables and community sessions. We'll do 1 round of community sessions, then we'll take what we've heard, we'll synthesize it, and we'll make a judgment call on where we think there's interest and excitement in further conversations. And we'll go back to, we think, 1 or 2 of the communities that we visited in phase 2. We'll go back there in phase 4 and workshop some of the options that seemed to interest and excite the most. Workshop them, test for viability, and then potentially in phase 5, we will report out on our findings, and potentially there will be room for consideration of a second phase project of actually implementing one of the transportation options that we've looked at collectively through the project. But that's not something that we are assuming, expecting, or driving towards. It's something that we're going to look at when we get there. We haven't got a predetermined outcome. The transportation needs we'll be looking at are how and why do people need to get around for school, for work, for medical, social, family, sports, culture, recreation. We recognize that there are more services available for medical transportation, but some of these social connections, cultural, recreation, family connections are I think also extremely important for our well-being and our social connection and being part of the social fabric. So we're also going to be sharing transportation options that we've identified both in the region and beyond the region, but we've really tried to focus on options that are in areas that have some characteristics that are similar to Northeastern Ontario in general, and Nipissing and Temiskaming District in particular. We've looked more at smaller communities, rural communities, lower populations, more dispersed populations. So to date, we've done some of that background research. We've also done some key informant interviews. We'll continue to do those. We have an online and in-person survey. We'll continue to distribute those. And now we're about to launch the community roundtables. So the community roundtables will be somewhat different. For the larger centers, we'll include active transportation and municipal transit will be a large part of the discussion. And I'll be telling you a little bit in more detail at the end about the session coming up in North Bay. For the smaller sessions, there will be some overlap. We'll look at some of the on-demand transit, which is also live in the urban centers, but we'll be looking more at smaller scale transportation services, which would also be viable in the larger centers, but we'll focus more on them in the smaller centers. So I want to just walk through some of the transportation options that we've identified. And I'm going to do that in 3 groups, what I call the classic to commercial. So just what are those transportation options that we've identified, and a really quick look at them. Then also a quick look at those, remembering Simon's 20-minute warning, community case studies. What are some examples that we found in the region or in areas similar to the region that are really exciting. And then we're going to look even more quickly at some community services that provide transportation or other services that we think there can be lessons learned there. We can extract some aspects of those models and apply it to community delivered transportation options. So under the shared transportation options, we've got the classics, we've got the innovators, the commercial options, and some hybrids. And we're going to look at all of those. And really, the language is fluid, flexible. What one person calls a ride service, someone else might call a ride share. So we're developing our own language within the project, but it won't be entirely consistent with every study and report that we've read or that you will read about transportation options. But this is how we split it out for the purpose of this and other conversations going forward. So the classics are ride shares. So ride shares are when we share our personal transportation with another, or when we join in the transportation being provided by another. So basically it's carpools and ride boards they're the classic. That's what have been, those options have been at play for, at least decades. And they have many benefits. They provide, they provide social connection. They share costs, they reduce carbon, they reduce congestion because you're putting more people in the same vehicle. And so you're having all of those benefits and all of those savings, and all of those extra bonuses of the social connection. So carpools and ride boards, and the carpools and ride boards of a few decades ago, where it was, I remember when there was a bulletin board up at Canadore College, and even if you weren't a college student, you could go up to Canadore College and look on the bulletin board and find a ride or offer a ride. That's how ride boards, that's literally how they work. Carpools were usually put together within a neighborhood or within a workplace. Now we live virtually, and so there's some different different options there for making these tools work. And so now we see a lot of organizing around. Carpools are actually online. There's platforms, there's software, and that's true in many of these different alternative or sustainable options. We've got an app, we've got an option, we've got a platform, we've got some software, and that's all very exciting. Might take a while to learn how to use it, but it's out there, and it really creates great potential. Then there's carpool options that are more like a virtual version of that old message board, of that old bulletin board, where you can go and actually find your community and click on it and see what rideshare offers are there. And then, of course, there's the other kind of social media options that we're familiar with that also provide some version, some variation of these connecting with others to share your vehicle, or connecting with others to share their vehicles. So there's a rideshare Facebook page in North Bay. There's a ridesharing.com is another large website. Kijiji calls it rideshare. It's more a case-by-case ride, a ride incident, I would call it. Although certainly you can find some that are recurring there. So there are those options available as well. Then the innovators, also a little bit technology dependent, and more, I think, brought more into the mainstream by the technology that's available. And auto share is one, or auto share or car share, where you have, sometimes they're commercial. I think of them more as cooperative. And the example we have on the screen is Communauto, which is it's a co-op that offers a rideshare service. So typically a car share service. So typically car share or auto share, you pay a membership fee. You have a set number of members are sharing a vehicle, usually located within a neighborhood. And then you book that time and you can use the car, you pay a rate. Usually there's an hourly, daily, or weekly fee. In this case, it's $3.85 an hour, $27.65 a day, or $150 basically for a week. Very reasonable, very affordable option for having access to a car, but you're sharing that car. And the assumption is that the members of this co-op, the members of this car share, aren't all in, high demand users of that car. Similar option is available for bikes. And I think we'll hear next week, different workshop. We'll hear about a bike share that might be coming to North Bay. And then van shares, which is a variation on the theme and often is more likely to be provided through a municipality or a non-governmental or a nonprofit organization. And often a van share is it's almost a hybrid between a shuttle service. And we'll look at a couple of examples later, but I put it I wanted it in the innovators category because there is lots of variety and lots of innovation around the way these larger scale shared transportation and on-demand transportation options are becoming more and more available. And we'll look at a couple of those in the community case studies in a few minutes. So then there's the commercial options. And I think the commercial options do provide a viable alternative to personal car ownership. Now, I will say that during COVID, car rental prices have gone through the roof. But there have been times, certainly in our family's life, where we used a car rental rather than have a second car. And I've had times in my life where I used a car rental rather than than own a personal vehicle. It gives you that option of being able to have the flexibility and be able to go off grid, off road, and again, it's a commercial version of car sharing, and some enterprise actually has an auto share or a car share program in some of the larger centers. Then there's ride services. Some people call YouRide, Lyft, Uber, a ride share. I don't. I would call them a ride service because they are a commercial service, and I would put local taxis in that same category. And when you look at the expense of owning a personal vehicle, the depreciation on the vehicle, the maintenance on the vehicle, insurance for the vehicle, parking for the vehicle, these ride services, even if an auto share isn't available, even if active transportation options aren't viable for you in a particular instance, these ride services still perform the function of reducing personal car use and car ownership and making a transportation option available in addition to public transit, which we'll be talking about in a different session that I'm going to mention at the end. And then there's airport shuttles. So I forgot to click my animation. Airport shuttles. I actually am a fan of airport shuttles, and I've taken airport shuttles from North Bay to Windsor, and you can actually arrange very seamless transportation from one from North Bay to the Toronto airport to the London meet point to Windsor, all in a series of airport shuttles. And so it's often not listed when you're looking at transportation options or alternatives, but certainly in the case of North Bay, if you're looking for options for out-of-town service, particularly to the south, it definitely should be on the options list, and I include it there. Then we look at some hybrids. Hybrids are blended options, and so these are options that they're public-private. So the Peace River Taxi Pass is an example. This is out of region, but it's in northern Alberta, and there's an excellent report on sustainable transportation options in northern Alberta. And the Peace River Taxi Pass, the municipality purchases block taxi passes, and they're available then to residents at a reduced cost. And it is a substitute for having a public transit system, and it's an on-demand transit system. In Elliott Lake, the city of Elliott Lake contracts a private company, and they run a shuttle from the city of Elliott Lake, which is about 100 kilometers north of Highway 17. They run a shuttle from the city of Elliott Lake down to Highway 17, where they have a coordinated meetup time with the Ontario Northland bus service, intercity bus service. So the shuttle goes twice, once for the bus going west and later in the day for the bus going east. So that's it's making that missing connection between that loop service of intercity transportation that goes around 11 and 17 and those interior communities that really don't have the same access to that. There's a new project, I think it's just getting underway in Haliburton, called Dial-A-Ride. And it's a variation, I think, on the Peace River Taxi Pass, except it's completely on demand. And so, but it's on demand with a sort of like we'll hear in the Transportation Options Workshop in a couple of weeks about dynamic dispatch in the City of North Bay transit system. Dial-A-Ride works something like that. It's you call the ride, but then the service provider develops a route that allows them to catch as many passengers on their way around that route as possible. So you're getting the convenience of the transit coming literally to your door, but the municipality and really the planet is getting the benefit of shared running, reduced running time, and more efficiency in having more seats filled in any given run. And then there's Innisfil. Innisfil started a project 2015. This is one of the first of these projects that I heard of. They started a project where they invited Uber in to deliver their municipal transportation system. Innisfil's also out of the region, and it's slightly, it's maybe overall higher density population than some of our rural areas, certainly lower density than the North Bay area. And they use Uber to provide their services. Now, there are some constraints on it. There's a limit to the number of rides that any resident can access within a given period of time, which is a bit of a challenge for some of the users. In all of these systems, the passenger makes a contribution. The municipality makes a contribution and the passenger makes a contribution. So it's a co-payment arrangement. So Innisfil uses Uber to provide that kind of transportation flexibility. And again, it's smaller scale. It's lower fuel usage vehicles, smaller vehicles, and so on. And they're now more than 5 years into the project. They've had to do some adjustment. They had to raise. They were very successful, and they were so successful they had to expand the service. And the detailed financial mechanics of this still isn't clear to me, but the rates had to increase because the demand was so great, which is sort of counterintuitive for me. But that was one of the lessons learned out of the Innisfil experience so far. So really great commonalities and differences across those different options. So I want to look at just a short list of community experiences, community case studies from Northern Ontario. Well, Muskoka and East Parry sound close to Northern Ontario. Some would include them on the map. I consider Northern Ontario to be north of the French River. Many of these projects got seed funding and initial support funding from something called the Ontario Community Transportation Grant. And there's a video that I consider showing you in part that talks about the Elliott Lake option, which we've already discussed, and also the Valrita case study, the Valrita example. So in Valrita, what they do is they run a van. It goes east along Highway 11 some days, and it goes west the alternating days. So what it is providing, it's providing connection to the larger centers to the east and the west of Valrita, which is a much smaller community. Wawa has been for a number of years providing a dial demand response transit system. And again, they try to group passengers, but it's curb to curb transit service. And they can carry up to 18 seated passengers. I have did do an interview with the service provider, and their ridership tends to be more in the 4 to 6 passengers at a time, but they do have the potential to carry more, and they also have the ability to carry up to 2 passengers in wheelchairs in the same transit. So their parabus and their resident transportation services are all accommodated in a single vehicle. Black River Matheson, their system is, and again, it's a pilot project under the same funding program. They have a route. So again, it's focus on connecting Matheson with other communities in the area. So they have a route that they run every day. Then there's a departure time. So they run from basically from Matheson to Timmins, going through a number of small communities on the way. And then they return from Timmins back to Matheson at the end of the day. And that's a daily service. I think it's 5 days a week. I don't think it's on the weekend. East Parry Sound has a community delivered transportation service. So this is for people needing getting to medical appointments, and it's a volunteer driver, and they pick up the passenger and take them to their medical appointment. So more narrowly scoped than some of the other services we've just looked at, or some of the other programs we've just looked at, but very dynamic program in East Parry Sound. And certainly, again, it's another case where we could some of the lessons learned there could apply to a broader transportation program. There's a couple of new programs over the last few years from Muskoka. There's two programs. One is running east-west, and that's on a weekly basis. And then the other runs north-south, all still within Muskoka. And so they're making transportation connections throughout the Muskoka district through two different services. And here's a project that I'm really excited by. It's a Manitoulin Public Transit Group providing, they're trialing a new on-demand service. So it's throughout Manitoulin Island. They're teaming up with a transit company and they're piloting an on-demand passenger bus, and it will loop around Manitoulin Island. And their goal is to provide a no-cost or low-cost transit system for Manitoulin Island on a permanent basis. So this is a project that was announced a year ago, and it's really a project, I think, project to watch and see outcomes there and how those outcomes can apply elsewhere. So this is the final set of snapshots, just looking at some community services that I think have lessons learned or elements that could be applied to transportation options in other instances or provided by other organizations or in other communities. So Cancer Care provides the Wheels of Hope. It's a volunteer driving program, and cancer patients can be picked up and taken for treatment and returned through their treatment program and after follow-up. Canadian Red Cross provides a similar service. It's for elderly, disabled people in need of medical services. So a little bit broader than the Cancer Care program, but still not available to the whole demographic in a community or in our range of communities. Meals on Wheels, not a transportation service, but I think provides some of those elements of coordination, volunteer delivery, community-based, and really to-the-door delivery. And then there's a program, and I will confess to you, I haven't been able to track this program. There's a lot of excitement about it 5-6 years ago, and I haven't been able to track its success or even its continuity, but it's transportation options. So it was motivated by wanting to take pressure off of the ambulance service and nurse accompanied services. And so it was delivered by the LIN and was looking at transportation of medically stable patients. So there were certain conditions had to be met in order to qualify for this service. But again, looking at meeting one of those needs, which is getting people from their home to a service that they require. So next steps in the project, we're going to continue with the key informant interviews. We really want to promote survey completion. We have 2 webinars we'll be doing in large centers, one in North Bay on February 14th, Temiskaming Shores several weeks out. We haven't firmed up the date, but we're looking to do it in approximately 6 weeks' time after we've done a series of 4 to 5 virtual roundtables in smaller communities. And we're looking at 8 communities. We have to shortlist to 4 or 5, and then we'll be scheduling them. We'll be releasing those within about the next 10 days. We'll firm that list up by February 14th so we can share it at that time. And then later steps are to review findings and identify 1 or 2 communities for follow-up session. So on February 14th, the workshop I kept referring to, it's a roundtable on transportation options here in North Bay for North Bay and area residents. You know, many of our transportation challenges in surrounding communities are also transportation challenges for the city of North Bay. If we don't have alternative transportation options for the many, many people who live in surrounding communities, if there's not a ride share or a carpooling option or a shuttle or something other than bringing your personal vehicle, all those personal vehicles will come into the city of North Bay, and we'll experience that in the city of North Bay in the form of congestion and slowdowns and increased auto emissions and so on. We used to joke many years ago about North Bay's rush minute, that we basically didn't have a rush hour. And now we do. We very definitely have a rush hour. So we have a real relationship between the city of North Bay and the surrounding communities in many respects. And one of the respects is transportation and developing some viable alternatives for surrounding communities will be good for residents in those communities and certainly good for North Bay. So on February 14th, we'll be doing our first large center roundtable, and we have two speakers joining us. We have Rod Bilds, who many of you would have heard last week, I think it was, talking about development options. And Rod is the chair of the City of North Bay's Active Transportation Committee. And he'll be talking about active transportation in the city of North Bay, including potential for I'm going to leave that for Rod to tell you. And Drew Poeta, the transit manager for the city of North Bay, will be joining us and talking about North Bay's transit system, but particularly talking about dynamic dispatch, which is relatively new in our city. Talking about, it's a pilot project, talking about how that's looking, how it's working, how do you use it? And Rod and Drew are going to sort of share off between them those intersect points between active transportation and the city's transit system. So we're really, really pleased that both Drew and Rod are going to join us, and really would welcome everybody on this evening to join us again on February 14th. And you can check out the website at transportationoptions.ca, email us at transportation@northwatch.org, or give us a call. And we'd really love to have your involvement and input as we move forward into the next stages of the project. So thank you. And I didn't hear Simon say 20 minutes.
No, I'll let you go a bit longer. You were into a good flow there, so I just let you be. Perfect timing, though, I'd say. And wow, I mean, it's I'm just amazed at the different breadth of all the different transportation forms and the categories and then subcategories within those. And there's a lot really to digest about that in itself. And it seems like the focus, and it makes sense actually what you're saying, is that because of the declining population and an aging population, that this, you know, a bus service or something that was traditionally seen as the option, right? Own a car or get the bus. But now we've got to find this middle ground, and we've got to look at all these alternative models of ownership and collaboration and who owns what resource, and just really thinking about travel in different ways. So I was really, really inspired, and you found some great examples of what's already being done here in Ontario. So from your research, what's kind of piquing your interest the most that you feel we could maybe do more of here in North Bay?
Well, I'm really excited by what I'm seeing happening in other communities. I think probably my two favorites are the idea of the van share. And depending on the circumstance, depending on the community, I really like the idea of a dynamic dispatch, of being able to, coordinate, sort of batch people to share that ride service. But I also like the loops. I like, some communities do these loops, and then when it's coming, and you can sort of plan your day around that. So I'm very excited by those options. I really like auto shares. I really like car shares. All of these projects have different levels of investment required. So obviously a car share or an auto share, it's a heavy investment. It's a heavy investment of organization, and it's a heavy capital investment to get it up and running. You know, so it's sort of a, you know, and I guess some of the van options as well, although you need a bigger fleet for an auto share than you would for a looping van. But I also am really attracted to the low, I would call them the low investment options. Really simple things like carpooling, and making that a flexible system, and really promoting that, because it's available. We can do it right now. 3 people can get together and they can do it. I think that we need our imagination reignited around those kinds of options in this area. You see it in the larger centers, and we don't see it very much here. So I don't think I got a very short list there, did I, Simon?
No, you like them all. No, I understand. I'm going to pass it back to Alex to kind of moderate. I can see some faces popping up here. So please, got any questions, Alex? Over to you. And I've got more too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody has any burning questions that they'd like to take the floor. I have a couple, but I'd be happy to. I see Kylie Ann, you've unmuted there, so I'm going to let you take that.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting to listen to, and all the different case studies. I guess my question is, if you have any examples from some of your case studies or insights around what the community uptake has been on some of these programs from people who perhaps had a car originally. Because for me, from the climate change side of things, I sometimes wonder, these options have to be more desirable to someone and easier than just hopping in the car that's already in the driveway. So there's a bit of a culture and a mindset shift that has to happen, partly around the different options that are available for people, but also, like you said, thinking about those social connections and the other benefits of reimagining what our transportation system looks like. So sorry, that wasn't really a question, but I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts around that.
Well, I think there was a question in there, Kylie Ann, and I think it's a great one, and I don't have an answer. I think your question is, what is the uptake of people who have the option of a vehicle? They have a car sitting in their driveway. What's the uptake of those people in using these alternative models? And I don't have an answer for that. And but I think it's an excellent question, and I'm going to go look for it. I'll get back to you if I find something or not, because a lot of the projects, the more northern and rural projects, are more designed for people who don't have that option. I'm not sure what the uptake how high the uptake will be, because that's not really the demographic they're pitched to. And B, I'm not sure whether that data will have been collected or not. But I think it's an excellent question. And I think it's a really, really important consideration in designing these programs that you do want to capture that demographic. So thank you for that. That's a very good insight and an excellent question that I hope at some point I'll have an answer to.
Yeah, I could kind of piggyback on that. And obviously, there's talk about kind of changing the fuel types as well, electrification, and what that means in terms of how infrastructure might change over time. So to reimagine where, the spaces where these vehicles could be stored. Maybe there's vacant lots in neighborhoods where they could be plugged in and they're, covered by these solar shelters, and integrated kind of penned in type unit where you just walk down the block and go get in a vehicle and off you go. Have you seen any examples of something like that being trialed, like a communal parking lot, or are they just found on the streets, these vehicles that you can access by?
Most of the auto shares that I'm familiar with and I've looked at, and a lot of it's anecdotal, just friends who live in large centers who are part of auto shares, they're mostly parked in neighborhoods. But I have seen some that are parked that do have a solar array connected to them, and it is, I think we'll see more of that. And I'm trying to recall the case that I'm going to look for that, because I was reading about one very recently. But I think they're going to be more up and coming. And I think that seeing that will be important, because I have a concern with the transition to electric vehicles, reduced carbon footprint, and so on, that might remove some of the incentive to leave your vehicle in your car, or to not even buy a vehicle, because there's still a big carbon footprint. Producing that car is a big carbon footprint, and there's no such thing as carbon-free electricity. Better, I'm a big fan of renewables, but it's not carbon-free, it's carbon reduced. So the less we use, the less we've used. And even if you're running an electric vehicle, the electricity that car had a carbon input, and the electricity that you're running it on has a carbon footprint, much lower than, gas or coal or nuclear, even, if it's coming from a renewable source, but there is still a carbon footprint. So less is less. There's no free lunch.
It's a really good point. And I guess COVID has caused us all to kind of, we've changed our working patterns, particularly people that worked in the service sector or offices, and you can work from home. It's much more accepted now. We've managed to break through some of these rigid barriers that existed in terms of how we went to work and how societies were organized. And so maybe that's the next natural shift, is that, to adapt our transportation systems to meet this more flexible lifestyles that we're seeking to build for people.
Yeah, and we found that we can move our work around a certain schedule. So I think we can find that we can move our work around a transportation schedule. Work is more flexible than we previously thought it to be, or accepted it being. So transportation can be part of that flexibility.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I'm hogging the call here. If anybody else got any more questions, please put in the chat, or just unmute yourself and feel free to speak. So in terms of North Bay specifically, obviously it's great that you got this consultation event coming up. That's fantastic. The round table one on the 14th. Look forward to that. The dynamic dispatch. So I think that's a great idea in principle, in terms of taking these buses to, or whatever vehicle it might be, to people's doors, and doing this kind of co-benefits of transport there. But I'm wondering if it might be that we could retain more frequent bus services down the main arterial routes, and then have smaller vehicles kind of looping around and connecting and constantly taking to these bus stops, so that it's an integrated service in a way. I just worry about some of these buses perhaps driving around neighborhoods empty, or, not fully, consuming more fuel than the intent was there to do.
And I was just about to dispel part of that myth by answering that question. And I'm going to hold back and say that is an excellent question for Drew Poeta on February 14th, because he knows the system very well, and he'll be able to give you a very good answer on that. So, if in terms of the city's, our city's system. So come back on the 14th and ask Drew, because he'll have the right answer for you.
I will do. Yeah, it's just being mindful. There's been a number of studies in Scandinavia, particularly, that said that, people, particularly in these northern climates, they're not prepared to wait longer than 7 or 8 minutes even for a bus. If they wait longer than that, then that desire to do good is going to soon drop, and that mode of transit won't be supported. So I'm sure there are times where the bus goes by every 7 minutes on some of these roads, sometimes not. So again, any comments about the kind of just
Okay, Simon, do you take transit in North Bay? Because buses don't come every 7 minutes anywhere in the city of North Bay.
I was being polite, but
but again, that's a case of you build your schedule around the transit around the transit schedule. And so, I actually purchased my house because of the bus schedule. And that was many years ago, but that was a key consideration. The reason I chose to live where I live was because it had a very, very good transit schedule. And so, I think that just needs to be in, it needs to be in our checklist, and that, and then it becomes more part of our, more part of the way we organize our day. I will say, even though I'm really trying not to answer any question that you might put to Drew, because he's the guy to put it to, I will say that the dynamic dispatch system in North Bay, the doors, the buses don't come to your door or on your street. They follow the same route. So when we use dynamic dispatch, we go to the same bus stop that we go to when we're on the daytime schedule. So they're not putting on, they're actually, I'm not going to say that they're actually reducing distance, because that would be answering something that you should ask Drew. But it's not. So some of the other dynamic, I might have referred to as dynamic dispatch, some of the systems in the smaller cities, in the smaller centers, where they do actually go to your door, but that's not the case in the city of North Bay's dynamic dispatch system. Joanna, were you going to pitch in on that?
Yes, you are accurate with that. The difference, you have to go to the bus stop. The only one that will pick you up at your door is the service for wheelchair and
Right.
handicap service. I forget what it's called, but that one you have to apply and be qualified by a medical that you require that service, and they will go to your door and assist. But you and a helper has to get you into that van or into that bus. You cannot, the driver will not assist with that. So you still need a little bit of independence.
Yeah.
But the dynamic dispatch is quite good. I followed the one in Belleville before, and it came on before COVID, and they were able to put the whole system on dynamic dispatch instead of set schedules, but it kept the system going. And what's important sometimes is you say the bus is empty, but what's important is sometimes that bus will pick up a nurse who lives in West Ferris and brings her to work at the hospital, and then she saves a life. We can't forget that. Even though there's only one on the bus, we have to remember that it's important. We need to transport people to work or to places they need to be, to medical appointments. So,
and the reality is that even on the daytime schedule, maybe because I live at the edge of the system, often we get on the bus, there's only a few people on the bus, but by the time we're downtown, the bus is full. Or no, not full, but it is certainly filled up. And so that's just the nature of a transit system in a city that's laid out the way our city is laid out.
Yeah.
And you can ask Drew more about that.
Drew's an expert with that.
Yeah.
And ask him about, you talked about the size of the bus. Mm-hmm. They've studied that too. So he'll have an answer. Yes, he'll have an answer for you on that one too.
Perfect. Well, Joanne, as you're on, can I ask you, forgive me for pouncing a question on here, what do you feel we could do to kind of increase ridership in North Bay? Like, how can we convince people to make that shift?
Honestly, the first thing I realized is it's cheaper to rent a parking spot in a downtown parking lot than it is to have for a monthly bus pass. That blew me away. I did that. Okay, so we need to raise the price. We need to discourage people from bringing the cars to the core.
Agreed.
And how do we do that? So one or the other. We won't lower the bus fares. I think they're subsidized enough as they are, but we need maybe rethink that and maybe increase our parking. But that's the mentality shift, because in Northern Ontario, our cars are best buddy, right?
Yeah.
And people would just blow up if we said, if you're paying $80 a month to rent a spot in lot number 2, so you can only walk for 2 blocks and go to work. If we go and increase that to 120, it would be a long time for people to adjust or just stop screaming about that. But it doesn't add up. And I haven't compared it yet to other towns, like if I could compare it to Sudbury's bus pass or Timmins, and how much does it cost if you brought your car into the downtown core to work? You should be paying a lot more for that car than you would to be on the public transit.
And it's another example where we have real tensions between competing priorities, because downtown merchants want free parking and lots of parking. But people who are advocates for the champions of public transit say, oh, let's really hike those parking prices up, where then it gives the transit system an advantage. And that's just life. We have these competing tensions, and we'll just have to, we just have to keep pulling at the fabric and get it to move in the way of being more, more advantageous to take public transit.
Yeah, and free parking will not give you more parking, because that person will stay there for 8-10 hours in front of the farm and not move. So you won't allow another customer to go there. And even I only had 5 parking spots at the back of my store, but right away it didn't take me long to figure out that no staff member was to park. The closest to the entry were the paying customers. And that would be really hard to enforce, I think, in a downtown area. So in a way, that's why meters came out, right? To monitor that. And if you're only going to pay for an hour, you're going to move your car and get out of there after the hour. And then another paying customer will come and give you more money.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I did have another question. It was originally for Brennain, but please feel free, Joanne, or anybody else, Penny, if you got any questions, further questions or comments.
I'm going to get in trouble.
No, this is wonderful. This is what we want, and we're really glad you could join us too. So yeah, no, in regards to like active transportation more generally, then, and like how we can, there has been some good work done over the last couple of years, more investments. What can we do to, whether it's getting more of the public on board with the idea of installing more crosswalks, more cycle lanes? There's a lot of pushback you see sometimes from the community about this value it has, but we almost need that to encourage people to start being more active, mobile in their region.
Yeah, the active transportation plan that Rod worked on, it will be implemented. As there's money, and it's a 20-year plan. And right now you may not hear about, we're going to do from here to here, and we're going to have bike lanes. It's incorporated in all the projects that the city's doing. So if they're repaving a road for 2 blocks in your neighborhood, and that was a designated street that was in that plan, they will do the bike path for those 2 blocks for now. And eventually it will all connect. But you may not hear of an announcement of another bike path or lane being open, because now it's part of the norm. It's part of the norm for the staff, for the engineering staff. And like right now, we just got this on Tuesday, we'll be approving the award of a contract for the repaving from Mountain View Road to all the way to Lee's Road. And in that, there's already part of that project has bike lanes in there. So it's part of the active transportation plan, but you're not hearing it like that. It's just part of the renovations that are going to happen in that area. So which is nice to know.
Is this related to the grant, that was approved the other day?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah. Well, we knew that last fall, and staff I'm amazed sometimes on how smart they can be. That this project's been designed for a while, and they said we're not going ahead unless we get provincial funding. We get money from the governments. We're not going ahead, and it was a good strategy because it's like almost 90% is funded by from other government levels, and only 10% will be our costs to the citizens of North Bay. So well worth waiting, and waiting maybe not to the ones that feel those potholes for a year or 2 extra than what they would have liked to, but when the price is right, then it's well worth it. But I believe there'll be sections of that they'll have bike lanes on both sides of the road, not just on one side. And if you've ever, I participate in the triathlon, when hopefully we'll get it back this year, and I train with a young man who has a racer, And I follow him with my bike to try to keep him safe. And it's not safe on Trout Lake Road between the Green Store to from the Green Store to Average Joe's. It's like sometimes you feel like you're taking your life into your hands because nobody's slowing down. You're still going the 80 or 70, but you're not going the speed or where it's supposed to be at. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'd say the whole stretch of Trout Lake actually down to the mall as well, in the intersection. I know a few people have been in incidents along there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good candidate for expansion if there's room. It's quite wide as a sidewalk there. Maybe you could.
Yeah. But eventually, if you haven't looked at that plan, go on the city website and just search active transportation plan. And it's quite interesting. I've heard it's a good read. For me, it's a good read. I don't know if it's like maybe
I was involved in some of the focus groups and fed into it.
But the logics of it all and the flow and everything. So yeah, I know heavily.
They did a super job on it. They did a really good job. And I think it comes back to what you said, it's that implementation piece. And it's good to hear, at least from, there'll be a new council come October, so different views about what happens. But it's good to hear from your perspective anyway that you would like to see it implemented. Because what you plan on paper.
And it's on paper. And I think now that it's on autopilot, that staff will always look into it every time there's a new new resurfacing, new pavement in an area, they're going to automatically do it. So hopefully there wouldn't be a council that you guys all vote in that would just throw that out the window. I hope not. Like, that's always my fear now, that things will go backwards, but I think they will go, there'll be enough that it will go, everything will stay forward and move forward. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you everyone for this really important dialogue. And Brennain, thank you again for speaking with us today. I know it's getting on 7:50, so we're going over time. We should probably all head on and have supper. Or I know, Brennain, you have a hot date at the ice rink.
Ringette began again. Ringette opened, so we're back to the rink.
All right. Well, I will. I'll send us all off. Remember, next week, Thursday, February 10th at 6:30, we have Dave Smith speaking from InduSpec. And yeah, that's it. And it also sounds like we all have a hot date on Valentine's Day, February 14th. I look forward to seeing you all there.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Brennain.